In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the more advanced features of Postman. And we're going to start off by taking a look at environments. So select the Environments tab, and you'll see that Postman just gives you a quick description of what an environment is. It says an environment is a set of variables that allow you to switch the context of your request. So we can set up some variables that change depending on what environment we work in. And you're probably thinking, well, what exactly is the point of that? And let me give you a great example. If you take a look at all of our requests, you can see that we hard-coded them to be 127.0.0.1, port 8000. And this is our development environment. Now, when we ultimately go to deploy our app, it's not going to be deployed on 127.0.0.1. It's going to be deployed on some server. It's going to have a public IP somewhere on the internet. And so when we want to test out our production server or make some changes to our production server, make some test requests to it, we would have to change the IP address, the port number, as well as we probably are going to be running HTTPS instead of HTTP. So all of our requests, we'd have to change all of them and then continuously flip back and forth every time we move from dev to prod and then from prod back to dev. And so instead of having to hard code these values and then change it constantly, we can actually create a variable that changes depending on what environment we use within Postman. So let's go to environment and let's create an environment. And I'm going to call this environment, we'll say this is dev, and then our project name, which is Fast API. So this is our environment. And what we can do is we can define a variable. And I'm going to call this one URL. And then here, I'm going to actually just copy this URL. And then go to our environment again. And then I'm going to give it an initial value. All right. And then our current value should update. And then we can just hit save. Okay. And so we've set this variable to be this specific IP in our dev environment. And so if we go back to collections and then go to our Git posts, first of all, now moving forward, you want to make sure that you're working in some kind of environment. So we'll select the environment we just created. And then instead of hard coding this value here, I'm going to change this. And I'm going to just say to actually use a variable, you do curly brace, the name of the variable, and then curly brace, curly brace. Okay. And it should be orange instead of red. If you get a red, it's going to mean that it wasn't able to resolve something and there's some issue. So just double check what you did. Orange is good. And then if you see this result when you hover over it, that means that everything's working. And so just to quickly test this, you can see that it says could not validate credentials. That's perfectly fine. I didn't set up the access token or anything, but this does confirm that we're able to resolve that variable. And so that way, if I go and then create a new environment, and I'll just add here, and then we'll say this is prod Fast API. We can then give a different URL for the production environment. So this could be like, HTTPS : / I don't know, some domain name that you buy. I'll call this sanjeev.xyz / and then I can save this. And so that way, if you ever are testing your development environment, you just go to dev, and then when you want to quickly switch to your production, you just change to that, and then the URL will automatically update so you don't have to change anything yourself. And it's super handy to set this up, and we're just going to do this for all of our requests moving forward. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to do this for all of them. Okay, and if you go ahead and test this yourself, you should ultimately not run into any issues. I'm not going to bore you through, individually testing these. You can do this yourself. And if you run into errors, it's just you probably pasted in something wrong. Now that we've set up authentication on our API, testing our API has gotten a little bit more challenging. And that's because I can no longer just go to create posts and then just hit send, because I have to be authenticated first to be able to actually create a post. And so what I have to do in Postman is I have to hit send. I have to log in and then get the access token. I have to copy the access token and then go to the specific endpoint I want to test. And then I want to paste that in there and then hit send. And then I can finally create post. And this is a little cumbersome and tiring. And it gets really hard if you have a short expiration time on your token. Imagine if you had an expiration time of 5 minutes. Then every 5 minutes, you'd have to repeat this process. But luckily, Postman has a way to actually do this through an automated fashion. Right? We're all developers. We all want to do things automated. So let's take a look at how we can do this. And I had to make sure that you guys understood environments and variables beforehand, because the method that we use actually makes use of environment variables. So let's go to the login user endpoint, and we're going to hit send and get a new access token. And so we've got this access token. And what I want to do is through code, I want Postman to automatically set an environment variable. So how do we do that? Well, let's go to tests. And here we can put in whatever code we want. And so we can read the documentation on how to do this, but the ultimate goal is to set an environment variable through code. So how do we do that? Well, there's a little snippet here that kind of gives you examples. And what we want to do is we want to set an environment variable. And so to set an environment variable, you just do environment.set, provide the key, and then the variable name. And so just like we did with environments, right? If you go into your environment, you've got the URL, which is the key, and then the value. And so we're just going to do the same thing, but just through code. So here I'm going to set the key to be JWT. And I'm going to set the value to be this access token. So how do we actually retrieve the access token from the response of the request? Well, we can do pm.response. That grabs the response object. Then we'll convert it to JSON, and then we need to get the token. And the token sits on a property called access_token. So whatever this field is called, this is what you're going to pass in. We'll say dot access_token. All right. And so now if I send this again, we'll get the token. The code should have run, and it should have set a variable called access token. And so now under create post, instead of hard coding this, what I can do is I can actually just reference the JWT variable. And so I set mine as capitals. There looks like there's one from a previous project maybe, but we want this one right here. And if you want to just double check, you could see that this ends in WYD30. And if you want to go back into login user, you can see that this ends in WYD30. So it looks like it did set that and update it accordingly. So we'll set that in there. And so now if we send, you can see that we can now create posts. And so anytime you log in a user, it's going to update that token. And we can verify this. If you take the last three letters, Q0A is the new token. And then I'm going to just remove that so we can see the value. And we can see that Q0A is the last three letters as well. So this updates it dynamically so that all you have to do is now just hit login user, and then you can start testing all of your other endpoints. And we're going to update all of the other endpoints as well. So for get posts, I'm going to put that in there as well. And then for getting an individual post, deleting a post, updating a post. We don't need it for create user. We might want to do it for get user if we set up authentication for get user, but we haven't done that yet. So we'll hold off on doing that for now.